Hello, and welcome to this very special episode of the Public Works Podcast. I had a chance to tour Southeast Florida throughout a few different cities and counties and was able to catch up with James Cromar and Christine Fanchi for this episode. I hope you'll enjoy this multi-person panel to talk through what's happening with the Broward Metropolitan Planning Organization, how that public agency works with private sector companies to achieve some of the things that are really important to that community. And we talk about a number of different things, funding and how things work at the regional level. And then we do a couple tours out on the sites and some streets. So stay tuned for that at the end of the episode. With that, I hope you enjoy this episode of the Public Works Podcast. Thanks.
This is James Cromar with the Broward Metropolitan Planning Organization, also known as the BMPO, and we are in the Broward MPO offices. Welcome to Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
We appreciate James opening up the office to chat with us today. We're going to be exploring on this episode the stories and the challenges for folks in the public infrastructure industry, what it takes to get things funded, approved, completed. Additionally, we've got our guest, Christine Fanchi. We'll learn more from Christine later as we talk with James Cromar. And in this area, we have a region of nearly 2 million people. And check me on these stats if you want. More than 30 municipalities.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about how you actually move people and cargo to create jobs, strengthen communities, and with no single city having to do it alone, that's where the regional approach comes in. We're going to talk about one of the more ambitious safety efforts in the country today. So our two guests, I said their names. I'm going to have them introduce themselves and their roles here. So why don't you start us off, James?
I'm a Deputy Executive Director at the Broward Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Christine Fanchi with WSP. I'm a Vice President of Transportation Planning in the region.
Awesome. Thanks both for being here today. Appreciate it. So, James, let's start with how you got here or how someone gets to this point. You spent more than a decade as a consultant in Denver before landing in South Florida. You want to walk us through your career journey, how you came to be in this role today, and maybe what got you interested in this field?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think strongly influenced me is my parents. My mother is from Uruguay in South America, and I remember going to Uruguay as a child for a couple of visits and being able to see that people can live in many different ways, that the kind of American suburban single-family home is not the only lifestyle that leads to a good life. And so as a child, I could see that contrast, that there are different ways that we can go about approaching our urban conditions. My father was a strong transit user. As a child, he talked about riding transit in the streetcar, and so we growing up learned not to just sit at home and wait for somebody to take us somewhere. We found different ways to get around. We would walk 3 miles to my grandma's house. We would get on the bus. We would ride bikes. And so knowing that there are a variety of different options in our urban situation and transportation is what guided me. I actually studied international relations. I wanted to make a better world and got into the city planning with the perspective that I could contribute to a better world in one location at a time. And so I started off as a part-time intern with a small design firm in Denver. That grew into a full-time position, 12 years consultant. And then I came to Florida and came to the public side, started with the city of Fort Lauderdale, then went on to Broward County. And then the Broward MPO was part of Broward County government up until 2010. And the MPO separated. And there's a bit of a story that I can hit on a little bit later on that. But so I've been involved in a variety of different planning ventures. Working with the small firm, I got to do all kinds of different things. So we did downtown development plans, the first bicycle master plan for the city of Denver, zoning ordinances, economic development, park design, public art, public process, variety of different things. And that kind of laid the foundation for a variety of different planning options. The last 17 years, I've been focused on transportation planning through the MPO.
Okay, great. Interesting journey there.
Yeah.
All the different levels. And I always enjoy chatting with people too that worked at different levels of government because you can both sides. You're at the city level, you blame the county, then you go to the county and you blame the cities, you all blame the state. So that's fun. Christine, you want to send a little bit on your journey? And
Sure.
unique perspective?
Sure. Born and raised in the Panhandle on the beach in Florida. Went to school for engineering at Auburn University and wanted to get out of the South. So I moved to Arizona after college, started in consulting, designing. First project was actually designing freeways. and then moved into more complete streets work. And then in 2013, had the awesome opportunity to go to the city of Phoenix in-house and really help the city host the NACTO Designing Cities Conference in 2013 and do 2 paint and planters projects in downtown Phoenix and really transform those streets in 4 months. It was just crazy time-wise. And being able to oversee from the city side, the planning, the design, and the implementation in 4 months just changed my life. I was like, I can do this. I can create streets for people in a really fast timeline. So decided I wanted to get back to my home state of Florida, came to the city of Fort Lauderdale in 2015, given the opportunity to oversee their Ped Bike Action Plan, which with my NACTO experience and experience from working with New York's, basically transformed that into a Vision Zero action plan. The city adopted Vision Zero in 2015, which was the first city in the Southeast US to do so. Did an action plan in 2017 and really was able to implement a lot of complete streets and safety projects in the time I was there. I went up actually to Pensacola. I was a county engineer in Pensacola a couple of years, and then in 2022 moved back to South Florida, back to Fort Lauderdale. I'm in consulting now and spreading the complete streets love across the region.
That's great. Yeah, and covered all of southern U.S. too. And
Yeah,
so we've got cross-sectional. I'm coming in from California today, so we've got it all covered.
that's
here.
right.
Appreciate that. So talking a little bit about those different levels, James, with working at the municipal level, county, now MPO. On the consulting side, you mentioned that a little bit. How does seeing the work from those different levels, you've got private, you've got city, you've got county, how does that inform how you approach a project or an initiative?
Yeah. I see great value in having experience at different levels. I have some colleagues who I worked with at the city that have spent their entire career at the city, and they are great experts on how to do things in the city of Fort Lauderdale. The question is, how does that translate to other places? So I appreciate when I was a consultant, we had projects in Montana, Texas, California, Southern Colorado, different cities in Colorado. And there was the idea of applying planning principles and working with communities that have their own unique needs and desires. Coming to the city level also then, again, it's not necessarily blaming the county or the state for the different things that are going on, but understanding that there's different levels of responsibility and seeing the city permitting and planning processes, recognizing that in Broward there are 31 different municipalities. So just because it's that way in Fort Lauderdale doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. Coming to the county level, trying to provide countywide services and seeing where there are inefficiencies and things that could be done better. I really appreciate being at the MPO because we are a convener of sorts. We work with all the different agencies. And so the point is for us not to just say this is the way it is, but to figure out a way to make the plans that we develop move forward toward implementation.
I think also being at the city level or on the consulting side, you're driving a speedboat. And as you move up, it's like a big freighter or a cargo ship. But having that mentality as you work with regional larger organizations to let them know it's okay. Sometimes we can move fast and we have alignment. So I think that's always good to interject that energy.
So when the Broward MPO separated from Broward County, we came from a 3,000 person organization to a 13, 14 person group.
Oh, wow.
And so we had certain funding streams, but we were back to that speedboat. And our executive director and I had worked with consulting firms. And so we tried to bring a consultant mentality to what we did at the end. Something needs to get done. Okay, get it done. Don't worry about titles. We'll all do what we need to do. It was a question of seeking different funding, being efficient, providing services that people wanted so that we could continue then getting more funding for the organization. And so we've grown to have about 40 people now. And I think, again, thanks to our executive director, Broward MPO has a reputation as being one of the leaders in the country for innovative approaches.
That's great. For the taxpayers, it's always important to see some product, right?
Yes.
And then they will continue to fund, and we like that in the transportation industry, keep funding the projects. So that's good. For a listener who's never sat in an MPO meeting, what does the Broward MPO actually do? And then how does your role fit within that large organization?
So the Broward MPO officially is the elected officials that comprise our board. We have 37 different board members representing all 31 municipalities in Broward, 5 county commissioners, and then a representative from the South Florida Regional Transportation Authority, the Tri-Rail. We also have a non-voting member from FDOT. And so the board is what this organization is, and we are the staff that provide support. We take their direction to develop planning studies and come up with recommendations and present them to them, but they're the people who actually vote on the transportation policy and funding options for the Broward region. I do want to mention that in Broward, we are between Miami-Dade County and Palm Beach County. And so the overall region has about 6 million people. And people don't stay within the county boundaries. There's travel back and forth between all different counties. And so we do coordinate with our partners regionally. I do appreciate being here at the Broward MPO because the membership has taken a holistic view of the work that we do. There's not very often battles about, this is my area, you get something, why do I get it? The board's been very good about recognizing that decisions that move forward transportation options in Broward in general will benefit each of the different communities.
Yeah, good point. And for an MPO, and we're saying MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, there's a structural funding need for MPO federal funding. You want to describe that a little bit, how important that is for funding to come into
Yeah, so the Broward MPO, we do get 2 different federal funding sources, and that provides our operation and planning funds, the surface transportation block grants, and we coordinate all that funding through our partners at the state level, Florida Department of Transportation. And so we set a 2-year budget, our Unified Planning Work Program. We just started the new work program on July 1, our fiscal year starts then, and we go through various reviews and approvals to say, here's where we want to spend our planning funds. And then the state and I'm not sure if there's federal level review, that's a good question. But anyway, we get reviewed and get approval for our work program. Supplementing then those grants that we get to run the organization, we've pursued different funding sources through discretionary grants, through other programs. We have about $1 million a year assigned to the MPO for projects that we want to do. And so we've assigned some of that funding for particular projects. We at times have flexed the funding over to FTA, so it allows us to do some different things that we couldn't necessarily do with the state funding programs. And so it's been a creative venture to keep on looking at different ways to be creative with the funding that is available and to advance the vision of our board itself. In 2009, the final long-range transportation plan as part of Broward County, we called it Transportation Transformation. Broward County is nearly built out. There is an area between the ocean and the Everglades that is approaching full build out. And so the question becomes, how do we make better use of the space and the roadway resources that we have and improve quality of life? We have about 60% of the county's conservation area in the Everglades that we don't want to go into. We want to keep that preserved. So how do we make life better for the people who are here and accommodate the growth that we expect to have?
Good points. And as I've driven around here a little bit, you all know this, you live here, but you have the ocean on one side and then you have kind of the Everglades and some lakes on the west side. So everybody is really focused into this north-south transportation corridor system.
Yep.
Every person that wants to go somewhere, they have to use a lot of the same roadways. So important to have regional voices there. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the innovative model you have set up here. And the model is different because traditional public works directors own the roads budget, but the MPO doesn't own the pavement. But you deliver, as you said, that funding to all the municipalities and work with the state DOT. So you mentioned the long-range regional transportation plan. How do you turn that planning document into something that actually gets built when you don't necessarily control the right-of-way because it's owned by another jurisdiction?
Yeah. Going back in all my planning career, this idea of collaboration and convening different agencies and stakeholders has been very important. As a consultant, we talked about how we could sit down and write a wonderful plan. Just don't bother us, it'll be perfect. But then nothing would probably come of it. And so I learned early on about the importance of a process where there's collaboration, of working with other people, so that when a plan moves forward and the planners have worked with the community to identify their vision and understanding what the issues and problems are and exploring alternatives and figuring out which solutions best meet the problems that the community faces. Having that come from the entire community then creates a constituency that will lead to the implementation of the plan. It doesn't just become, we have our safety action plan here, and we're proud that it's a plan that we worked with many members of the community at the agencies and private sector, community champions, different people. And so it's not just a plan that came from the Broward MPO and our partners at Broward County. It's something that stakeholders in the community embrace. So this becomes important as we do planning work for the MPO. Again, we don't own roadways, we don't implement, we don't operate transit agencies and such, but the planning that we do, it's imperative on us to work with the partners that we have so that we can share with them their visions and then developing the alternatives and recommendations that come from that. This isn't always successful though. There have been times where with some of our agency partners, we work with them, we sit in meetings, we come forward and say, hey, we have worked together to do this plan. And infamously, one person who I won't name went before the county commission and said, I've never seen this before. And we've sat in meetings. How can you say you never saw this? There are different political factors that come into play, but knowing that there were enough other constituents that had participated in this process, we were able to work around that obstructionism and find other ways to move forward with a plan that had a lot of support. In working with our agency partners also, though, it's important to understand what their particular limitations and concerns are. And so coming up with recommendations that they can support and are willing to implement. It's very easy to say, and no offense to Christine, but as a consultant, it's easy to say, here's the right thing to do. Sometimes the right thing isn't going to get done. So let's figure out what we can get done to move us closer to what our vision and our goals are.
And that consensus building and engagement can get some ownership from the local entities.
Yes.
If they have ownership, they want it, then they get the funding.
Yes.
Perhaps easier to implement.
Yes.
On the implementation side, I wanted to talk real quick about quick build or demonstration projects. Putting something on the street fast, letting the public experience it. Traffic mobility can be organic in some cases. Sometimes you need to test it out. What are your thoughts about that, and how does that work in this region, or anything you want to point out?
So the Broward MPO developed a tactical urbanism program, and we learned a lot of lessons by doing that. The idea of looking at engineering solutions and testing them with temporary materials can be very efficient and save money. Sometimes people think if you do a tactical urbanism project or a quick build and it doesn't work, that it's a failure. No, I think that's the success. You've tested something and you haven't spent a lot of money and you figure something out, and then you can go back and see if you can find something that works better. We worked with a couple of different local agencies to implement some quick build projects. And some of the lessons that we learned are that people get very excited to see when something works. You remember that, and they want to make sure that these improvements become permanent. And some of our funding cycles are slow. And so once we identify a project, it takes time to then do the actual design and then to get the construction done. And the people want to see things more quickly. What we're encouraging now our partners to do, the Broward MPO is not leading any quick build projects, but we did develop a quick build plan as part of our safety action plan. And so we coordinated with our partners at the county and the state to say, what's the process? What are the acceptable materials? What is the county willing to maintain on the roadways that they maintain? What will the local agency need to maintain? But a process to get something in place, and we hope move more quickly toward implementation. It's great when people get excited, and then it's not great when they're frustrated that things take so long. So.
People say, why isn't this just done faster? But if it gets done quickly and not correctly, then there's the complaint on that side. Right?
Yeah.
So the testing is an important part of that process to develop the solution.
Yeah.
Great. So I want to talk a little bit about the safety action plan and the Safe Streets for All grant. I'm going to bring in Christine a little bit here on this. But Broward won the maximum $5 million Safe Streets for All planning grant from the USDOT.
Yeah.
And Christine, you and your team were leading that effort, working with James and his team. You want to talk a little bit about that process and how that worked and how you were able to be successful? There's not enough money for every municipality to win every grant, but you guys did that. sure, thanks to your efforts. You want to chat about that a little bit?
Sure, thank you.
And what did I leave out about the program and the interesting part of your application?
So first off, the MPO won the grant first.
With Broward County, our
With a
partners.
match from Broward County. WSP obviously proposed on being your selected consultant and competed for that. The reason I feel like we brought the best assets were, I brought a team, I had 10 subs with me, so a holistic team, not just WSP, from local and national expertise, bringing the best Vision Zero experts. The other thing was I had worked at the city leading Vision Zero here locally. I knew the politics, obviously very passionate about pushing really progressive things so we can get to zero. I also am an engineer, now a planner. So really the mindset of how do we get there is, in my mind, more implementation, as James talked about, with the quick builds and getting projects in the ground. And so bringing that lens of how do we design it so it can be feasible and implementable. The $5 million really gave us the advantage of not only being able to do the analysis and the public engagement, but also going the extra step to produce all these documents. We did 8 individual safety action plans, from lighting to schools to ped bike to safe speeds plans. Each one identified specific projects for that need. So we had 7 projects just for lighting action with cost estimates. We had 3 school zone projects, bringing people walking, biking to school safely, identifying quick interim things that we could do, as well as long-term things we could do with cost estimates broken out. James could bring it forward and say, oh, we can get a Safe Routes to School grant to fund X, Y, and Z. We could work with the county to do signing and marking, things like that. So really an itemized action plan to get things in the ground so that we can get to zero. In addition to the 8 action plans, we also created the quick build plan. We did a safety dashboard, so interactive safety dashboard for the public. We did the Safe Streets Design Manual. One of the main Thank you. One of the main things that I've seen in my experience is we have all these great plans, as you mentioned, but how do we get them into implementation? And when you go meet with the engineers, they're saying that they're held to the books that they have. I need a book that can tell me that I can do it. So we created a book that basically identifies the context that you're designing within, the speeds that you should be designing to, and then all the overall safety countermeasures that you can implement within that context and speed that are appropriate. The great news is that the state of Florida has already got a Florida design manual that supports 99% of the things that are in here. And so this was really built to bring those implementation guidelines to the cities and the county in Broward. So really excited.
That's cool. It's somewhat like a NACTO project.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I don't know if you just want to chat about that, your experience in NACTO. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, mm-hmm. of having a different design guideline and what that allows at the local level.
So NACTO Urban Street Design Guide, I was lucky enough to contribute on with the City of Phoenix. And that was published in 2013, which was, to me, like a pivot point in where New York City was implementing the bike lanes and the city bikes and the Times Squares, right? And they were putting it in a document so that cities were empowered to redesign and rethink how they build cities and move people instead of cars. And so by designers having that new green book, I like to say, in their hands, they were given the flexibility to design for people instead of cars. And where our state manuals were typically for moving cars very fast, this manual is more about moving people safely, right? Mm-hmm. Being empowered to basically leverage that and bring that to Broward and put that into work here with the Complete Streets projects has just been amazing. So we've seen results. So.
And in collaboration with our partners at Broward County and FDOT.
That's
so
right.
This is not just a perfect document that
Correct.
Says what should be done. It's what's acceptable with our partners.
Great. Correction there from what I said. Broward won the Safe Streets for All grant, and then you all delivered the safety action plan.
Correct.
And help with this. So James, back to you. Do you want to talk about how you put together a successful winning application? People will apply every year, all the time, but you guys were successful. Anything you remember about the unique, or just because it was James Cromar, they said you get the money?
No. No, not in that case. Okay. As the initial Safe Streets for All grant notice of funding opportunity came out, we were partnering with Broward County. Again, because we don't own the roadways, Broward County has traffic engineering duties for the entire county. We recognize that we needed to work with them to develop an approach. We developed the application, and with that, our Broward County partners, as Christine talked about the different focus plans we did, some of those came out of the desires of the previous traffic engineer saying, I really want to look at school zones. I really want to look at crashes in neighborhoods. I really want to look at mid-block crossings. So we were able to create a list of the different things that we wanted to try to achieve through our safety action plan. So again, it was addressing their needs and our needs too. Broward MPO, as I mentioned, because of our having to figure things out as we became independent, we had a lot of experience successfully managing federal grants. So we were going to be the administrators of it, and then Broward County would be partners on that. The Broward County offered $1.25 million or 20% local match with 3 different projects that they were doing as in-kind services. And so each of those studies had safety components that were then able to feed into the work that we were doing here with the safety action plan. So again, we were trying to be efficient and be productive with the resources that we had. And I do think that as we talked to our different partners around the country, we got one of the biggest grants. And so we wanted to do something that others could benefit from the work that we did. Some of our partners around the state had different scopes and different approaches, and we were jealous of some of what they did, but we started off on this path to go deep into a lot of different areas. And so again, the planning that we did about rail safety, we've done a lot of reporting that now partners that have rail issues can build on that. The quick build guide, they can take that. The Safe Streets Design Guidance Manual, we're hoping that people can use that in other places. And so we were hoping that by the federal government making that investment in what we were doing, that we could provide examples for others across the country and within the state.
Okay. So it sounds like, breaking that down, for a successful application, you had a good partnership with the owners of the facilities. You had project kind of data and experience coming out from 3 projects that were showing what and then you were investing in replicatable resources or reusable resources.
Yes.
And so they said, that's great. We're going to give you $5 million and you're on your way.
And we said all that in 300 words in the application.
Okay, there you go. And I'm sure some good pictures. So, Christine, one of the safety analysis showed, I think it was 77%, you can correct me on this, percent fatality and severe injury crashes happen on just 6% of the streets. Is that true, number one? And number two, what do you think about that statistic? And what did that drive the team to try to think about from an engineering or planning approach as you're building in these high injury networks?
That is correct. 77% of KSIs happen on 6% of streets. The good news is it's only 6% of streets, so we can do this. We can take action.
Focus, yeah.
The thing that's staggering, 137 crashes every day in Broward. Every week in Broward, 4 people are killed and 8 more are seriously injured. It's our responsibility as people taking action to reverse that. Other cities across the world have gotten to 0, have reduced those numbers. So we're empowered to do that now. So the statistics and the analysis really came first to identify where those hotspots are, where is our high injury network. That led into having dialogues about what we can do, what are the major types of crashes that are happening. And then we did a whole public outreach phase, going out to the public and letting them know kind of what kinds of crashes are happening, when are they happening, and to who and where are they happening. That was our first phase. Secondly, really with my implementation design passion, we really wanted to identify which streets we could transform. And so working with James and the team on creating a prioritization matrix on what streets are the highest priority, and then working together to make sure that we identified priority corridors that basically served as an example context. So we didn't just pick the top 10, basically. We said, okay, let's make sure we pick one that's urban, one that's suburban, one that's 2-lane, one that's 4-lane, one that's 6-lane. We really got a diverse mix to try to make sure that when we did a design concept for our 11 priority corridors, that they served as an example of what you could do for safe streets on a 6-lane arterial versus a 2-lane urban arterial.
And if I could add something about the jurisdiction, because over 50% of the roads on our high injury network are state-owned facilities, FDOT. About 26% was county, and then about 20% was local roads. So as we looked at our 11 priority corridors, we wanted to not only have a different set of roadway configurations, but also different jurisdictional ownership.
We had 4 state, 3 county, and 4 city.
Yeah. So the point is to work with different jurisdictional ownership, different agency requirements, and different types of configurations.
It is a little bit unique for cities to have these state corridors or county roadways running through municipality area. These are streets that people, bicyclists, everybody's using, even though it might be a state facility. So that seems a bit unique. Maybe not in Florida, I don't know, but across the country, they're usually city streets and they control all that interlaced restrictions.
So the ownership going through different urban areas, it creates issues of what's the purpose of the road. So let me pick a few roads in downtown Fort Lauderdale that are state facilities. And so the state views those as part of the highway system to move people around the state. But they also are streets where we have high-rise buildings on both sides, people living on both sides, a big apartment complex and the grocery store across the street. And so it becomes a local street also. So there's inherent conflict of what is the purpose of the road and who should be doing what. And our partners at the state level have been very good in terms of working with us locally on looking at opportunities to make the road work better. The context classification that we have at the state level allows for different countermeasures depending on the roadway itself, if it's an urban core versus a typical suburban commercial street. And so the state has allowed for the introduction of mid-block crossings. They're exploring speed reduction on some of the state highways through the urban parts. They're looking at some vertical features, maybe some raised intersections, which would not be typical on a state highway typically. And again, it's recognizing the state facility can play a role as part of moving people around the state, but it also can respect the local context. The state in the past has been open to looking at some different uses of the roadways, but in the past they would say, we'll give up this road, Hollywood Boulevard, for example, as a state facility, but then we need parallel facilities that could be one-way pairs. Okay, that works. But there's another example on Wilton Drive through Wilton Manors, where it's a state facility, there's 4 lanes, and it's the commercial Main Street. And the community was advocating to make it work differently. And the state's offered to give up the roadway, but the city wasn't necessarily in a position to do that. Over time, it evolved for the state to say, look, we'll look at allowing for this road to go from 4 lanes to 2 lanes. We'll add bike facilities, on-street parking, street trees, streetscape, all these different things. And tests show that the safety has improved on the roadway, and that also traffic flow times have increased. And it's not just a question of the physical improvements, but it's a question of timing of signals and such too. So we're being able to show that some of these safety measures can result in safer roadways, but also that don't inhibit the flow of traffic, which is part of the function of a state highway facility.
Sure. Very interesting points there. Also on the statistics, I just want to maybe point this out for some more context. You all can tell me if you agree or not, but you have 3 of the most populous counties in Florida, between Palm Beach County, Broward, and Miami-Dade. Broward's in the middle.
Yes.
And people are commuting along this coastal corridor. So even though that you have some of the accidents, it might be they're just trying to get from A to B and commute. So in a hurry, maybe commuters do strange things sometimes. So you have that context where maybe your statistics are a little bit higher, but it's not your traffic, for example. And the other thing is it's a tourist destination.
Yep.
And so you have a lot of people maybe unfamiliar with what's going on or how it works here. So those could be contributing factors a little bit to the high stats there.
So with, as Christine mentioned, some of the statistics with over 50,000 roadway crashes a year on our roadways, it's hard to go in to understand exactly who's doing what in what situation. So we've taken the big picture approach. It's the roadways in Broward. We want to be safer. And our partners in Palm Beach and Miami-Dade have also been working on their safety action plans. The solutions that the data show us are not necessarily what we also anticipate. We hear anecdotally that over near the port where there are cruise ships, there was some people who were not from the area that didn't understand how the crosswalk signals work, and that was a factor in a crash. But that doesn't mean that the situation's fine, it was their problem. We need to look at that to see if there are different things we can improve. The other thing too, some of our crash statistics, we had some ideas before we started what they might tell us, and then we allowed the data to correct us. So for example, we started off with a lighting safety action plan, and I anticipated that a lot of the deadly death and serious injury crashes were occurring at night where it was dark. And it turns out very few occur where there's complete dark. There's some light in a lot of these crashes that occur at night. And so the question was not putting in lighting, it's putting in lighting in the right places, in the right configuration. Poor Christine and her team, they were out there at night, like measuring safety, and
That's right.
you survived.
I did survive.
We were concerned
One thing
for
that
you.
came out of that analysis, which is interesting, was that the highest crashes happened at dusk. So the hour right before complete dark. And as we were driving around and noticing the lighting, the lights don't come on during dusk because the photometric meters have enough light that they're not turning on. So really having those conversations about, should we get those lights, would they make a difference if we had the lights on an hour before dusk? So really rethinking kind of policy decisions as well. So yeah, the lighting plan was really interesting. We also, driving around, we have a lot of infrastructure, but it's not on. So we've had issues with people stealing copper or the maintenance not being done. And so we've got a lot of infrastructure. We just need to get the lights turned on.
So a little quick fix too, quick build, praising our partners at Broward County Transit. They have been installing solar powered LED lights at the top of all the different transit stop signs. So it's a quick, easy fix. I'm saying it's quick and easy, but effective. You don't have to worry about wires being stolen.
That's right.
And it provides some visibility at the transit stops. Now we recognize we've got to work on improving the lighting for the people once they get off the bus to get to the corners and be able to cross the street and get where they're going. But each of these little things helps.
That's great. So on implementation, Christine, I want to talk to you a little bit about trying to balance the boldness of Vision Zero against what a city could actually build and maintain. You have thoughts about that, and maybe it's just trying to do your best. Not will quite get to 100%, but on the implementation side, do you have anything you want to add on that?
It's a tricky question. Like James mentioned, we had the 11 corridors, 4 state, 3 county, 4 city, different cities, of course. And the progressiveness of the in-house staff really was dependent upon how excited they were about going as far as we could to get to zero. A project corridor that we did in Deerfield Beach on Southwest 10th, east of 95, 6 lanes, didn't have enough traffic to host 6 lanes. They're really pro Vision Zero. They've adopted Vision Zero recently. So at the 3 intersections, we proposed roundabouts, pull out the signals, put in roundabouts, narrow it from 6 lanes to 4 lanes, separated multi-use trails with vertical trees or between. So really separating the modes, slowing speeds, raised crosswalks between the roundabouts to really create an environment that's slower. Another corridor that is a priority is 31st Avenue for our county. And they've been doing studies for many years to improve 31st Avenue as a high transit corridor, but also a high traffic corridor. 6 lanes, again, in the heart, and north-south connector. Like you said, we're all kind of moving north-south here. So the issue is that we were letting transit users off, but then the distance they had to go to cross was great. The speeds are high most of the day. So really, it came to light that we really need to move the transit stops to align with crosswalks, or just put a crosswalk where we drop people off, was like one of the main findings. Oh. So on that one, we were bringing the speeds down a little bit. We didn't go as progressive, but we were able to bring the speeds down, put in multi-use paths on the sides, narrow the lanes, not take away lanes, but narrow the lanes to fit in those trails. And then put in the crosswalks, raised intersections to keep the speeds low and provide that pedestrian connectivity for the transit users.
And I do want to compliment our partners at Broward County, though, because they have looked at reducing the speed limits on 31st. We got a Tiger grant and did some bike lanes, and so they reduced the speed limit. And they're looking to reduce the speed limit again and add those vertical features that would not be possible on a higher speed road. The countermeasures are appropriate for the context. And they're going to test some things. It's in an area that is a suburban residential, some commercial on there. And so what will be beneficial on a regional level is that as we talk about certain things that we've done in the city of Fort Lauderdale or Hollywood communities on the east side of the county, some of the Western groups say that doesn't work for us. And so 31st Avenue will give a chance to say, look, this is a roadway that's more like what you have in your community. And you can see how this works. We appreciate our partners, the county, moving forward with the implementation. They're applying for funding through the SS4A program for implementation grants. And they are also looking at a variety of different funding sources to move it forward. And the great thing is that the 5 cities that are along the corridor are being very vocal about wanting it to move forward. We were good at getting the constituency for implementation, so they're going to make sure that this happens.
Exactly. And I'll say that those plans included for implementation, like short-term things we could do, restripe crosswalks, signal timing, LPIs, all those good things, so that those could be implemented sooner. The lighting at the bus stops is another one, putting those lights there, really putting actions that are short-term as well as programming the long-term, so we can get that kind of self-enforcing better outcome for the future.
Just a little technical point here. We've been saying Vision Zero, but would you just mind explaining Vision Zero, what that is for our audience?
Sure. Vision Zero is a vision towards zero fatalities and serious injuries on our streets. It was started in Sweden, mid-90s, and came to the U.S. in 2012 via New York City, and then spread across the U.S. Like I mentioned, we brought it to Florida in 2015, and a lot of cities are working towards that. The last administration, SS4A, Safe Streets for All grant money came out, and so now agencies across the nation are working towards zero through the SS4A program to create safety action plans and implementation of those plans through the implementation grants.
Great. So on this track, I want to come back to you, James, real quick. You've stated a goal that zero traffic fatalities in serious industries can be done by building safer streets and changing driver behavior. Chatting with our audience here today, talking about, is zero realistic? Is it aspirational? How do you keep elected officials and the public bought in over the years that it takes?
So that's, I think, the crux of the issue. Is Vision Zero realistic or aspirational? And we've had many good discussions with our elected officials and with our advisory committees about setting goals that are realistic and achievable. But then there's also the struggle with Vision Zero of, okay, so how many deaths are acceptable? How many do you want to do? So we work toward a goal, or we've set a goal of zero deaths on the roadways by the year 2050. And our team that worked on the project looked at, here's what it'll take, a variety of different measures, different ways to move forward. It's not just major capital improvements. It's
right.
the different things that you talked about. You know, something that's going on in Broward, we have noticed a slight decline. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you knew that, the slight decline in the death and serious injury rate on our roads. We want to see if we can accelerate that. In the Dangerous by Design reports, though, about road pedestrian safety, when I first moved to Florida, South Florida, I think it was in the top 3. And now we're down at number 17, which sounds great. But part of that is because other areas have gotten worse. And as Christine was talking about some of the things with the lighting and the sensors to have the lights come back on, there are a lot of things that are beyond what we can do at the Broward MPO level. There's manufacturer specifications for lights. And there's also things about why is our death and serious injury rate increasing on our roadways? It has to do not only with car design, but there's a variety of different factors. And so there are big picture issues of people having bigger vehicles, greater weight, less giving if they hit somebody, that makes it difficult to achieve this zero goal.
Distracted driving, right?
That too, yeah, there's all kinds of things. There was a report this morning of somebody drove off in Pompano Beach, I think it was. They drove off the side of the road and hit a pedestrian and killed them, and then they ran into it. And why does that keep happening? So it's safer drivers too. We will be continuing to monitor our progress toward achieving the goals and revisit the goal, and we'll work to make progress on achieving the goal and modify as necessary. Will we be a failure if we don't get to zero by 2050 but have improved the safety on our roads? No, I think it's that quick build thing. We're continuing to learn, but we want to be making progress.
Okay. I'll add that we do have streets that are zero right now. We might not have the whole region, we might not have a whole city, but we have streets that are zero. So,
and some of the small cities have reached zero for a few years at a time.
Right. So I think it's achievable. I just want kind of building on those successes, really doing before and after analysis to say how did this change, what changed, and then using that to spring into action on other streets. So really getting those things in the ground so we can test them.
Or also in our analysis of school zones. In Florida, we have special school zones when children are going to and from school. Speed limits are reduced to 50 miles. Okay. And so our statistics showed that during the time when the lights were flashing and speeds were decreased, there was only one death or serious injury crash involving a child under age 18 over a 5-year period. We're almost there. It's working well. The state has allowed us now to have camera enforcement of speeds, And so that's an area where I think we can continue to improve and do better and stretch that out for other things.
Agreed.
So.
Yeah, that's good. And it comes down to a lot of different organizational dynamics, but setting a stretch goal can help people, force them to be open to other ways to address the issue, like what you talked about here in some of your manuals and quick builds. We're going to get to zero. We're going to have to do something different. So good points. Christine, on these documents here, this didn't get written in a conference room, right? It wasn't just the design team goes in, does that, comes out.
Right.
There's an extensive public outreach program, focus on equitable outcomes, roadshow events. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more and why it was important to meet people where they are in their neighborhoods? And do you think that extra effort was worth it to inform how these documents were created?
Of course, yeah. And I'm sure you can add too. We had different ways of getting to the public. One was that we had a technical committee of all the city engineers and planners. On the technical committee, we had an oversight committee. We met once a quarter with the higher ups, assistant city managers and the like. Those two groups were meeting regularly to really be informed of the issues, the analysis and the crash data, but think what best practices across the nation and then what our role could be coming out of this so they can inform us on kind of what the needs were from local municipalities and our partners. Really, we had state and county folks on both of those committees. The second was we did a regional awareness campaign to start. So after we finished the analysis, we had all this data to share. So left turn crashes are the deadliest crash in Broward, right? So making people aware, be careful. Left turns are really take the time. So just doing an awareness campaign out to the community. Once we identified our priority corridors, we really took the opportunity to go to those communities and host public meetings. So we did an initial public meeting where we rolled out a plot of the corridor with basically the crashes plotted out and said, what issues are you having? Why do you think these things are happening? You live here. And they were able to give us some really good feedback about the issues and concerns. And then we came back to them with a proposed concept and they were able to understand it, but we were also able to educate. So if we had, let's say, a raised crosswalk that was proposed there, how does that work? We don't have one. So we're able to have those discussions. We had renderings of all the safety countermeasures available to be able to educate on all the different ways that you can transform your street to be safer, have safer outcomes. And so it was really a two-way street of us learning from them of what the issues were in that specific corridor, but then us being able to educate on how we can get to zero together through implementation and design and bringing awareness about the county-wide education. And then after, at the kind of the end, we did a safety roadshow, which James really led. And that was going out to community events that were already happening. So we had like a seniors event and a children's event that we went to around the county and able to hand out, show them, here's the map, here's the analysis, so awareness again, and then here's the implementation plan, here's our policy actions, our program actions, and our implementation actions. And our goal is to get to zero by 2050. One lesson that was interesting was at the beginning, we were doing social media with the awareness campaign, and we're using static images. But then we produced one video and it just went crazy. Everybody loves videos, right? And so we pivoted all the way to videos. So our PIO team was really strategic in doing more awareness with videos. So one that I really love is the implementation of tree-lined streets to improve safety. Right? Studies show that if you have trees on both sides, it really helps you focus on the road. Number one, you're not scanning as you drive, you're focused. And then also it slows you down because you have that kind of tunnel effect. And so we did a whole video on the difference of driving a tree-lined street versus, and like that video. Anyway, that's one of my favorites. We also did a roundabout video, which I love too. Those are also a resource.
And if I could add on the public process, if we had sat down and tried to work with the public to design the safety features, that might have been fun for them, but I'm not sure how beneficial it was as much as going in and saying, hey, you live in this area, you travel through this area, can you tell us things that we should be aware of?
Yeah. A couple things there you all brought up. One is the power of video. So it's the number one way people consume their information. That's why we're talking on a video podcast today. The second thing is when getting the information out there, and you all had a website and a safety dashboard as part of this foray, right? I don't know if that website is still live.
Yes.
Do we know what the website is?
Safe Streets, 4Broward.org.
What I like about that and what you said, Christine, is you didn't have an awareness message that said drive safer, that stats look bad, you could say your left turn number
Yeah.
is the most unsafe thing you can happen to you or highest risk. Be careful with that thing. So giving the community that level of specificity, I think, is something every driver could think, oh, I can remember that, or
right.
every time I'm turning, oh, I remember that issue. So
If I could add on that, we on our website also have a safety pledge. So it's easy for me or you to tell people, oh, you shouldn't do this or that. Okay, but what can you do to be safer? And so in our safety pledge, it was like, what can I can not text and drive. I can wear a helmet when I bicycle, all these different things. And we ask people, pick 3 different things that you can do to be safer on your road as you travel.
Being specific about
Yeah.
trying to give them, So the handoff happens from your design team, Christine, planning team, comes to the county. You use that to inform future implementation plans and maybe where dollars go. But how do you all try to ensure more that this plan becomes a pipeline of fundable capital projects in the future versus just a report that looks really cool and has good branding and graphics?
Yeah.
We talked about you're working with the different municipalities, but anything else you want to mention on extra things you did to try to move from the planning documents into funded projects?
So it's easy talking with the community and our elected officials as we talk about the Safe Streets for All grant funding. And they think, okay, that's the opportunity to fund this. Or we go through our transportation improvement program and talk about our MPO attributable funds. And I think it's important to recognize that our MPO funds are not the only game in town. The SS4A grant is not the only. There are a variety of different ways to move forward. One of the directions that we received at the federal level for the SS4A was to develop low-cost, high-impact projects. We have a threshold of $3 or $4 million for any project that goes into our long-range plan. And there are a lot of improvements that can cost less than that. So that becomes then a responsibility at a local level maybe. So it could be county with some of the different funding they have, or a city, or if it's something that we've identified in a plan, then a city, as a developer comes in, they can ask them to do some of these investments and improvements. So there's a variety of different ways to move it forward. We joke about we could have bake sales too, sell a bunch of cookies. But the point is to recognize that we're all in this together and that the MPO is not the only group that's going to do it. We at the MPO have also been supportive of our local agency as they pursue Safe Streets for All funding to do a local safety action plan. Again, we can only focus on a certain number of roadways, and so they can go in and look at what their local needs are or pursue demonstration or implementation grant funding. What we do, though, is provide support that the federal reviewers want to see that a local group is not just duplicating the work that we've done. And so I think a great tool is our safety dashboard that we set up. The MPO will be updating every year with the latest crash information. And then a local group can go in and in about 10 minutes, maybe an hour, find out so much about the safety statistics in their area versus having to go out and do all the data gathering and analysis on their own. So that's one way that we can increase the efficiency of the system and make it easier for them to move forward. And then we have also started a small group. Those people that do receive the grants, we meet with them on a regular basis so we can learn from each other. So right now, a lot of them are figuring out getting their grant agreement signed and moving forward into procurement. And then as they start going into their data analysis phase, or we want to be able to say, hey, this city did this, how about, and so they get together and convene and talk to each other. And that's one way that I hope we can be supportive of creating recommendations that actually move forward implementation.
That's great. I think a little best practice there to dig in on is when you have an area that's ripe for heavy development, if you have a plan in place and your approach to that street is somewhat set, when the developer comes in, they have to do offsite improvements. This is what you need to do, right? From the very beginning, makes that decision easier and the discussion easier versus some agencies which the developer comes in and they go, okay, what are we going to do? And the developer is moving forward. We don't have time for planning and all that. Just tell me the basics, and you end up with maybe not the ideal situation. So
yeah, and that's an experience that I appreciate, having worked at the city of Fort Lauderdale and the design review and the permit level, where I would see the staff wanting to ask for improvements to better the urban situation, but asking for a developer of a single family home to put a bike lane in front of their house. But if that bike lane is part of a larger system, then they can help defray the costs. Or put a transit shelter in front of this new building. You know, what is the amenity that will be actually beneficial for that area and part of a larger context? We've learned also as we go after grants that the idea is not to see the grant opportunity and say, what can we do, versus have a plan with a variety of projects. And then when the opportunities come in, matching a particular project to that particular funding source.
Another good best practice, I think, to highlight there, when the notice of funding opportunity comes out for any specific grant, it's too late to start planning what you want to submit for, right? So having things ready to go, align with that grant, know what comes out, you know where you're headed with your application.
And if I can give a shout out to the city of Miramar, our MPO chair is a commissioner in the city of Miramar. They're an example of a city that did a transportation plan and identified projects and prioritized them. And so every year the opportunities come out for funding and they say, okay, here's this project, and then the next year these others. And they are very good at getting the funding and then getting the projects built. Just in the last few weeks, they had 2 different ribbon cutting events. They have a conveyor belt of projects moving forward.
That's great.
Yeah.
Shifting gears a little bit here on our last segment on leadership, I wanted to talk to you, James, about collaboration. That seems to be part of your entire operating model. We've talked about that here. You can't order anyone to do anything, so it's the power of persuasion and influence and good ideas. What does it take to get 31 municipalities, counties, state DOT, all kind of pulling in the same direction? And where have you learned that maybe through a great example or the hard way?
Yeah. I think part of the good example for the Broward MPO came about when the MPO membership decided to separate from Broward County and have us be an independent organization. Prior to that, the Broward County MPO was almost like a rubber stamp organization for what the county and the state would want. Because 80% of our voting structure is at the local level, the cities were saying, wait a sec, there's all this funding, how do we do projects or figure out how to get some of the funding for projects that we want to happen? So as the Broward MPO separated from the county, we had to change that working relationship with our membership. I think we have been successful and fortunate to develop a trusting relationship with our board members so that quite often our votes are unanimous in support of what we come forward with. Our executive director has been very good at talking to the board members, listening to what their concerns are. And so as we move forward, we are taking their direction, but also helping set a direction too of where we need to go. And they'll say, take this step and we'll take that many more steps forward. And so very rarely do we have long discussions and debates, unlike some of our neighboring agencies where a lot of the decisions tend to be parochial. And so that's a relationship that we are looking to maintain. The Broward MPO also can be a resource for some of our partners. For example, a Broward County commissioner over 10 years ago asked the Broward MPO to create the first set of complete streets guidelines for Broward because it was not moving forward at the county level for whatever reason. And so we developed that, and then the county ended up adopting those guidelines. So we can work together and do things in a different level and provide that planning vision and guidance.
It seems that in this area of Florida, it's important to have a regional approach also because the cities are blended together.
Yeah.
There's not a big distance separation.
Not anymore.
On the street,
used to be.
Sign, and now you're in the next city. So you don't want a 4-lane street to run into a 2-lane and all of that.
A city, an urban area has roadways, but it also has housing. It has an economic base where people go to work. It has what we call a marketplace where people gather to either shop or to interact or do different things. It has parks. It has open space. It has trails. It has all these different things. When we can try to introduce that as part of our planning, we did work on what we called mobility hubs. So looking at where there's a variety of transit modes that come together. And it's not just a question of how to make those modes interact better, but how do they interact with the environment that they are in? How can strategic public investment spur private investment and work together to create these transit supportive, pedestrian friendly areas where they are appropriate? So
that's great. Well, a question here on workforce development, I'll ask you both this, but if you could give one piece of advice to a younger planner or engineer, early career, who wants to actually deliver, not just plan or ascend to your success of you all, what would that be? What's a nice piece of advice?
I guess I've been fortunate because I started off in the private sector. I had an engineering degree. I was able to get my PE really young. And then given the opportunity to move over to the city of Phoenix about 10 years into my career and really see the public sector side, but having the knowledge of how to design streets was really unique. When I went in-house at the city of Phoenix, really nobody there had designed a street. You're like, wow, you know how to design things and know what will work. They had done all the public outreach that I hadn't really done yet, but they hadn't designed the street. So I guess I would encourage, if you're an engineer, get your PE early if you can. And then I love that if you could go in, work in an agency, that would be great. As I moved to planning, I was able to get my professional transportation planner certification from ITE. And then most recently, I got my road safety professional. So that's given me more professional respect from both sides of the house. Here in Florida, when I came to work for the city of Fort Lauderdale, the state has a lot of money here. And so I remember one of my first meetings as the city livability planner, I sat down across the table from the state traffic engineer, and I started talking about hawk signals coming from Arizona. And he was like, "Who are you?" And my boss was like, "Oh, this is our new livability planner. She's a PE from Arizona." And he turned and just looked at me, and he and I had a conversation, even though my boss and my executive director were sitting next to me as planners. The respect from the engineer to the engineer was very prevalent. And so it gave me a lot of leverage to be able to have those discussions and support the planning vision of my leadership, but really engineer speak to the people who had the money and be able to make the changes. And because I was trained with NACTO, I was able to push more progressive things and have more progressive conversations that met the goals of the city that I was working for. That journey has really helped me be able to implement more, because the things that are coming out are more feasible and implementable and meet kind of the guidelines to move forward into design.
Okay, so get your credentials early if
Yes.
you can, but keep getting them.
Yes.
Keep getting them. Cross-sectional foundation, public and private.
So, two thoughts: curiosity and critical thinking. As a young planner with a small firm, I was able to dip my toes into a variety of different things. And so any task was an opportunity for me to learn. Being curious and learning and taking on different levels of responsibility. The other thing, though, about critical thinking, as we get all these new technologies and smart tools and such, we need smart people to run those. I was recently looking up something. I'd read a book and I wanted to find more books by that author. And so I went on the internet, and then the AI tool said, "Oh, here's another book by this author." And I thought, that doesn't sound right. I just read that. And so I put in the AI, that doesn't seem correct. No, you're right. I gave you wrong information. And so it's with that curiosity, it's being able to say, this doesn't seem right, and question, because again, the tools are only as good as the people who use them. And if somebody goes in and does an AI report and it's all wrong, it's going to reflect poorly on them for not reviewing it, not knowing that it was incorrect. And so I think there's opportunities, no matter at what stage we are in our careers, to always be a little more curious and use critical thinking skills.
Yeah, good points. Especially as we head into more of the land of AI, right? You want to kind of know what the end result is and use that to support, maybe then use it as the only source. Good points there. So James and Christine, I want to thank you both for your efforts in a very complex area of South Florida and trying to bring the region towards Vision Zero. That's great and admirable. Thank you both for your time today. If you stick around, I think we might have some video about some actual project sites we'll take a look at. And thank you all for watching this episode of the Public Works Podcast. Be sure to thank a transportation or public works or planning professional. They're doing the work you don't see until it actually gets out in the street. Then you can thank them again. And follow us on YouTube. Check us out on LinkedIn. Like this episode, share it with a friend, subscribe to those channels. Any closing thoughts, James? It's your shop here, or anything you want to mention for where they should go to find your efforts?
I'm excited to hit the road and show you some of these projects and let people see what we've done.
All right. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Christine, for being on.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time. So we're here with James and Christine. Tell us where we are. Tell us what's going on.
Once again, we're on Wilton Drive in Wilton Manors, Florida. It's a state highway that had a 4-lane configuration and now has 2 lanes. I was living in Wilton Manors and became part of a task force that the City Commission authorized. There was a lot of push from certain residents and business owners to narrow the road from 4-lane to 2. And there were other people that concerned because it has a function in the state highway system. And so we were on a task force with local residents and business owners and others to come up with recommendations. And so during an 18-month period, we developed a consensus of, if the city wants to look at narrowing the road from 4 to 2 lanes, there are a number of things, looking at some of the zoning to allow certain development along the corridor. There's on-street parking with meters, and the recommendation was that parking revenue go toward a fund to do improvements on Wilton Drive, not just go citywide. There were a number of other things, and the city went through that process. And then when the opportunity came up, as Christine was telling the story about working with the city of Fort Lauderdale to look at a lane reallocation project, the city was ready to do that. Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Sure. So the original project was actually south of here in the city of Fort Lauderdale. I was with the city at the time. The city had gotten money in partnership with the MPO to just widen the road for bike lanes. The state had just adopted the lane repurposing guide, and so they had a process for doing that. Looking at the traffic volumes, we were able to basically do a study to go through that process and show that the lane repurposing was viable, go through the state process to get that approved. But because we were just repurposing the lane and it was just basically a painted buffered bike lane, we were able to extend that funding up into Wilton Drive because the task force had identified this opportunity. 2 pedestrians actually had just had fatal crashes on Wilton Drive in this section. So it really kind of leveraged all that action to be able to extend the project for 2 miles and do the project between the city of Fort Lauderdale and the city of Wilton Manors, and really get all those improvements for the full 2 miles and have that connectivity between the 2 cities.
And so in Fort Lauderdale, it was using existing curb lines and repainting the lanes, whereas in Wilton Manors, there was actual moving of curb lines, widening of sidewalks, adding landscape areas, different buffers.
It looks like they tried to maintain to the maximum extent they could the drainage lines. There you can see a storm drain there, and then you have the bump out.
Yeah, and over here.
So trying to maximize the use of the funds while still getting some horizontal compression, right?
Right. And I will say that the design concept contemplated a parking protected bike lane, but because it's a state road, the current state standards at that time in 2018, we didn't have the buffers available on both sides to implement that alternative. So we ended up with the bike lane configuration we have now.
Okay, so this was 4 lanes.
So we are currently on A1A, which is also Ocean Drive in Fort Lauderdale. And it is a state highway facility. But as you can see, the state highways don't always have to have 4 to 6 lanes. A1A had some storm damage in 2012 from Superstorm Sandy, and then another storm that came in and tore out the foundations under the road. So we had to do some emergency repairs, emergency funding through the MPO to repair the roadway, and I'll let Christine talk a little bit about that. But it was impressive how, working with the city, the county, the state, and the MPO, we were able to get emergency funding authorized, which is part of our role as an MPO.
And this road used to be 4 lanes, 2 lanes each direction with just a striped center turn lane, and angled parking along the beach, really no pedestrian access. And because of the storm pulling it all out, the community was able to really reimagine this street and what we needed. So obviously we have 1 lane each direction, the wide sidewalks, the on-street parking, the beautiful landscaping, but also the seawall was built up. It goes 30 feet into the sand to really create a more sustainable roadway connection that really brings the community together.
Yeah, 20 to 30 feet deep sheet pilings, so that when a storm does come in and tears out all the water or all the sand, it won't go underneath the road and tear out the foundation. Long-term resiliency. Now, the other thing is, this was about a $9 to $10 million project for about half a mile. And as we deal with resiliency, this is a great way to do it, but that's a tremendous amount of money. We have 80 miles of coast from north to south. 80 times 160. Yeah, it's a lot of money. It also was an example of the cost might have been higher because it was an emergency repair.
Right.
And so the MPO, and working with partners, we decided we need to be smart about planning and anticipating resiliency issues so that we can do improvements on a more reasonable schedule. So we can do improvements on a more reasonable schedule and not have to pay the premium for emergency repairs.
Right.